Thank you all so much for joining us today for this Zoom webinar on the role of natural gas and oil industry tackling climate change and providing U.S. energy. There are many headwinds right now managing lots of things, the markets, government policies, both regulatory and legislative, increasing societal pressures to address climate change issues more impactfully. My name is Diane Berman. I've been a commissioner at the New York State Public Service Commission since 2013. Immediately prior, I served as the chief counsel to the New York State Senate Republican Conference. I was actually their first female chief counsel. As the chief legislative legal officer, I advised the temporary president of the Senate and the entire Republican Conference on every legislative policy initiative confronting the state at that time. I've also held a number of other positions, including special counsel to the commission, assistant attorney general, senior court attorney, judicial clerk for our highest court in New York, assistant counsel with the Department of Economic Development, executive director of the state PTA, and director of pro bono affairs with the State Bar Association. I serve on numerous committees and advisory committees at the National Association of Regulatory Commissioners and on advisory committees at PHMSA, and I chair the NARUC DOE Natural Gas Partnership Initiative. The National Foundation for Women Legislators is really excited to be partnering with the American Petroleum Institute, API, to bring you an update on energy policy. Let me introduce our speakers, Megan Barnett Bloomgren and Stephen Comstock. Megan serves as the Senior Vice President of Communications at API, where she is responsible for overseeing communications on behalf of the natural gas and oil industry and leveraging research, advertising, earned and digital media, and thought leadership. Prior to joining API, Ms. Bloomgren served as Deputy Chief of Staff at the U.S. Department of the Interior, where she directed communications, strategic planning, and policy-related actions, directed strategy and operations for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's Energy Institute. She also previously served as Chief Spokesperson and Deputy Director of Communications for the Secretary of Energy, as the Deputy Director of Communications at the White House Council on Environmental Quality in the Executive Office of the President, and was Deputy Press Secretary at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Stephen Comstock is currently the Vice President, Corporate Policy for the American Petroleum Institute. His responsibilities cover coordination and managing cross-segment policy issues such as climate, tax, trade, operational security, and emergency response accounting and cyber issues. Stephen has been with API for over 17 years in a number of roles. Prior to API, Stephen was a tax attorney with ExxonMobil in their tax department and provided planning advice for various projects in their upstream, downstream, and chemical operations. He has also been an adjunct professor at Georgetown Law School and was formerly chair of the Energy and Environmental Taxes Committee, the American Bar Association's tax section. I'm going to turn it over in a minute to both Stephen and Megan so that they can talk to us. We'll have about 30 minutes of their presentation talking, and then we will open it up for some Q&A. Stephen, Megan.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Berman. My name is Megan Bloomgren, and I'm happy to be here with you today and joined by my colleague, Stephen Comstock. I am a strong advocate for women and for women lawmakers as really those that are problem solvers, as we often talk about in our industry of problem solvers. So it's a real honor to be speaking to you today. Our goal is really to do three things. It's to give you a sense of who we are and what we do as the American Petroleum Institute across the country, how we as an industry see the future and how we're shaping it, and also to give you a sense of some of the resources as you think about representing and answering your constituents' questions. I also think we'd really like to hear your feedback and have an open discussion, as the commissioner noted towards the end. So please don't hesitate to raise your hand throughout or in the Q&A section. as you all may know, and I'll go through some slides in a second if you want to bring those up, Caitlin, API represents all segments of America's natural gas and oil industry. So we have about 600 members that either produce, process, distribute, or refine or export most of our nation's energy. And we support about 10 million US jobs and have really a strong and growing movement in really every congressional district in the country that supports some of our principles. And before I get into like the what, I thought I'd give you a sense of what I think we may have in common. Despite all of our different backgrounds and upbringings, I think we all believe that Americans and the world want cleaner energy to directly shrink this problem of climate change that we're really all working to deal with. I think it's clear that the future is increasingly lower carbon. And our view is that these kind of challenges and solutions that are really large, this is our industry's sweet spot. We've been leading and transitioning with technology to address some of the world's greatest challenges since our inception more than 100 years ago. So we're really here for this moment and for the innovation that's necessary. The second thing I think we all may have in common is that the world is going to be using more energy 20 years from now than today. Even though we're just hopefully coming out of the pandemic, the International Energy Agency believes that natural gas and oil are going to make up the majority of those needs globally. The population today across the world is at 7.7 billion people, and that's expected to grow over the next 30 years to 10 billion people. And so we're going to need more options, not fewer, and more lower carbon options. I guess the final thing is that really technology and the pace of technology advancement, not just the invention, but how we're incorporating that, is so critical. And we're an industry that, from whale oil to kerosene to light streets to the invention of the light bulb, which was really revolutionary. And then our industry's work to move from kerosene then to liquid fuels in the transportation sector, and our efforts to make those cleaner and cleaner throughout history have really been improving and providing foundational energy that's connecting the world and supporting our daily life. And so that there's some of the things that are really important for us as we share who we are and what we stand for and how we see and are shaping the future. But that's a little bit of the why. Let me give you some of the what about what API is, and I'll move through this quick because Stephen is going to provide some good updates in a couple minutes. But API was formed 102 years ago as a standard setting organization. So meaning as new petroleum, natural gas, and petrochemical equipment comes online, we've been working across our members to develop what are the safest and most environmentally responsible operating standards, so that you don't have people in North Dakota doing something different than a gas station in Kansas versus up in Pennsylvania. Many of our standards, they meet or they exceed some of the requirements at the state or the federal level. So everything from drill bits or interactions with soil, these are sound engineering processes that give us the ability to then advocate for the industry in a larger way. There are 700 of these standards that we're constantly looking at and refining as innovation moves forward, and they've been incorporated into state and federal regulations. They're also the most widely cited standards by the international regulatory community. I guess on the other side of what API does with its 600 members is we speak for the industry as a whole, to the public, to lawmakers like yourself, to Congress and the executive branch, and to the media. And we do everything from work with regulatory agencies to provide them with analysis, to representing the industry in legal proceedings, to participating in coalitions and working in partnership with other associations, really to achieve the policy priorities and in many ways help provide a path for a lower carbon future. If you go to the next slide, just to talk a teeny bit more about the standards, thanks, Caitlin. These are designed for manufacturers of production, drilling, and refining commitment. And so we have a program that verifies that the manufacturers are operating in compliance with industry standards. We have another one that certifies inspectors of industry equipment to ensure that everybody is working up to specific inspection codes and are performing their jobs in the right way. We have a training program. So contractors who are doing work, particularly around the service station contractors, that they're meeting all the safety personnel and getting regularly updated. And then you may have seen if you've had your oil changed or if you've changed it yourself, which I applaud you if you have. But that we have licensing and certification and a seal that goes on every sort of engine oil that is used across the country, and all the right ways to dispose of that. If you go to the next slide, thanks so much. But broader than just what we do, it's really our industry's impact. When I first started in Washington, I worked, well, I guess it was a couple of years in, right out of school. I started at the Department of Energy, and at the time it was about 2006, and we were talking about importing enough energy. And we were talking about running out of energy here in the United States. And really, over the course of the past 15 years, there's been a dramatic transformation. Not, I would say we weren't even talking about natural gas as something that was used here in the United States. And at the same time, it's really transformed our broader economy. Today, the US leads the world in reducing emissions, largely because of the market that we've seen. More natural gas come online and the ability to produce that in a safe, environmentally responsible and cost-effective way. And it's increased the amount of natural gas. It's our number one source of electricity here in the US. And yet we have so much that we're also able to ship that overseas, some of the extra to export that, export environmental progress, as you may, to many nations that are still using coal or wood or don't have regular access to electricity, which is more than 1 billion people worldwide. So I think the other thing is that we've been able to do this in a way that's kept energy affordable here in the United States, and brought communities. I grew up outside of Philadelphia, and there were 67 counties. And my first job out of college was at Accenture, and we were implementing a statewide voter registration system. So I actually traveled to all 67 counties in the state. And many of them, there were a lot of like help wanted on the main streets of counties. And today, these are like they're getting kind of big supermarkets like Whole Foods there because of the dramatic transformation that's occurred with more manufacturing coming back and more energy here in America. If you go to the next slide. Thank you so much. At the same time, I'm not naive, and we do a ton of research, and we know that there's a narrative about this industry that's been formed over many, many years. And that is largely that, the industry is old and dirty, and in some cases greedy. And our job and our work has really been to reshape that narrative and to back it up with action, which I'll turn it to Stephen to talk through. But we also recognize we're a complex and nuanced industry. And the media has a long memory about different times when there were different standards and different work that we were doing. And so our effort is to really be strong in defining us as less roughneck and more high tech, and all that we're doing to incorporate technology, all that we're doing to capture those emissions and develop the kind of technology that is enabling us to produce American energy in the most environmentally responsible and safe way, so that we're giving back to communities and conservation areas in a very big way. If you go to the next slide, I'm going to just share some of what we've been seeing from voters. These are nationwide surveys, so not necessarily in the areas that you represent, but I think there's a growing recognition that the American people think that it's important for us to continue producing natural gas and oil, and that we have regular access. 3/4 of those surveyed among all political parties believe that having American energy in the mix is going to help us with economic recovery, because as we get back to work, as we maybe fly a little more, as there's more on the healthcare side that comes online, that's energy is one of the things we're going to need. The second point is that energy, natural gas and oil will be part of the energy mix for decades to come. We talk often of some economic data out of the Paris-based International Energy Agency, which shows that even if every nation across the world implements all of its goals to the Paris Agreement, natural gas and oil are still going to make up almost 50% of the world's energy needs. And, our companies are innovating in addition from many other sources, but it's important to understand that connecting people to energy is part of the Paris Agreement's goals as it talks about alleviating energy poverty around the world. There's a lot of views in addition that the government is responsible for addressing climate change, but that the real solution set and the innovation will happen in the private sector. So there's a real want and desire for Washington to work together more, of course, but also for our industry and others to come together and really help with these solution sets. And so that has been a big focus of our effort, is building those alliances, working with lawmakers to demonstrate some of the policy solutions and some of our industry's accelerated action to really get at these big issues in a way that's still enabling us to deliver the affordable, reliable, and cleaner energy that people want. So with that, I'm going to turn to Stephen to really talk a little bit more about how, not just from how we've been talking about the narrative, but how we've been putting that into action. We go to the next slide, Caitlin.
Great. Well, thanks, Megan. I really do appreciate the lead in, and I also appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all today. It's been an interesting path in my career to go from tax all the way here to climate. I've taken on some of these big issues, but this is one that I've really enjoyed, and I wanted to spend some time to just talk to you as how the industry has evolved in this space. Megan certainly set it up in a great way, and I really would like to just kind of step through some of the more specific items that we're sort of taking on and why we think we have such a role in this engagement. So just we've been at, even though people may dispute it, we really have been at the climate issues for quite some time, but really working on initiatives for over the past couple of years, really because we've seen the issue go back and forth in the political debate. And we recognize that one of the things that really allows the industry to move is when we can kind of come together and sort of work on initiatives and work on solutions. And so we decided that we were going to take that on. And we started out with the Environmental Partnership launch, which is a group that is made up of our members and also other producers in the United States on the upstream side to really take on the issue of methane. And it brought people together to look at solutions around the issue of methane leakage in our upstream operations. And that really kicked off, I think, a real understanding as to the desire of our members to take on some of these big issues, and also the capabilities out there of our members to really tackle things. And so as we sort of have been progressing, we've been also recognizing the role that climate's going to be playing in the energy policy. And we've been identifying the need in our State of American Energy that we do every year, at the beginning of the year, to highlight the role that industry can play in that debate. Recently, we've developed a position on climate, as well as principles around climate policies that we have helped us define what we can be about and what we can be for, and how we can engage with lawmakers and policymakers at both the state as well as the federal level. And again, we have sort of approach this by identifying different ways in which we can initiate that within the industry and then take that to lawmakers. And certainly the idea around technology, things like carbon capture and hydrogen and other innovations that we're seeing take place within our industry through normal market forces, has also then been developed into policies that have been able to enhance those opportunities, I think, across the broader market. And this has really been culminated now into a set of policies that we as an industry have decided upon, which is the Climate Action Framework, which was rolled out in March of this year. And I think is something that we are really looking forward to be able to engage with lawmakers at the state, federal, and even the international level, because this is an international issue. So just moving on to the next slide. I think is again, just sort of taking on, this is a challenge. We've always been sort of questioning, well, is this something that we can succeed in? And I think looking at it before as well as after, we have been able to understand that as we can produce, we can also essentially have a detachment between our production and emissions that we're seeing from the burning of the combustion of our products, as well as the role of energy in the economy. So we've seen production increase over time, and we've seen CO2 emissions essentially detach or no longer sort of correlate with the sort of increase in production, which leads us to believe that there's other ways in which we can actually sort of drive that CO2 emissions curve further down and have it further gap occur. Through things like CCUS, as well as other offset technologies, and also through new technologies like hydrogen and so forth that our industry can produce. I think it's also interesting too that while this slide and this graph is really focused on emissions and production, it's very similar to emissions and GDP. You've seen the same sort of separation occur between emissions and GDP growth. So what we've seen is the ability for economies to grow while emissions are remaining flat or declining, which is a positive sign as well, that again, we're sort of taking this on and tackling ways to do it. Now, Megan indicated that a lot of this is really determined because of the switch from coal to natural gas. But again, there's other technologies, as I mentioned earlier, that can also drive this curve or this separation even more. And then just moving on to the next slide, I think that one of the pieces too that we recognize as we engage with states and the federal government is that we are a significant source of revenue. So while we continue to produce, and if we can keep the emissions trending or lowering as we have, we can still generate significant revenues as well for the federal and state governments and support various funds that are out there. So through taxes, royalties, rents, state income taxes, state severance taxes, motor fuels taxes, and things of that nature that are collected on our industry, we fund significant amounts of operations, state budgets and federal budgets as well. And that's something that we've recognized for a long time. We're certainly know that a lot of the severance taxes and property taxes that our companies pay support schools and support local governments, and of course that's also included in state sales and use taxes, local sales and use taxes as well from just our operations. So we recognize that there's this unique tie, and we recognize that that's important to the various state budgets and even the federal budget, and it's something that we as an industry want to maintain and carry forward. So as we sort of think about these points and think about the climate issues that our industry is facing and the desire to tackle the risks associated with climate change, we have come up with a set of policies that we think that provide a framework for us to sort of take these on and work with governments going forward. And if you can just move to the next slide, we can talk further about it. So the climate action framework is committing towards policy actions so that we can begin to really tackle this in earnest and work not only within the industry and not only with policymakers, but also with other industries and with the market broadly to address the risks associated with climate change. And our framework is made up of 5 points. And the first point is accelerating technology and innovation. That is extremely important to recognize that while people are looking at 2050 and beyond for significant emissions reduction, that's going to have to come with technology innovation. And we certainly have taken that on as an industry in the past, and we're focused on it in going forward. A lot of this is around new fuels like hydrogen and offsets like carbon capture and storage. And we support the effort of government and the funding of government technology efforts to sort of get these off the ground, sort of that basic technology that's necessary in order to identify and take some of the risks that maybe specific industries wouldn't, to identify these moonshots that are out there, and then ways to move those into a more commercial status. And we're working with lawmakers as ways on various proposals and policies to do that. Of course, we recognize that we also have emissions from our own operations, and it's important for us to mitigate those emissions. This is part of the environmental partnership, as I mentioned earlier, that has been looking at methane and the methane from our upstream operations, but also they've expanded that to the midstream and pipelines and terminals, as well as to look at flaring and the need to address flaring from upstream operations as well. And so there's efforts afoot to not only figure out ways to measure those, but also ways to mitigate those, and to identify opportunities within the industry to better set the footprint from our upstream operations. This also includes downstream operations, so looking at refineries as well, and the large industrial complexes and that exist not only in refineries but also within other industries as well, and working together with them for ways in which the large industries can reduce the emissions associated with their operations. Of course, one of the big pieces of this is the support that API has taken on the direct regulation of methane. We certainly are going to be working with the EPA on identifying the rules associated with that, and welcome the opportunity to engage and figure out ways in which to tackle that issue more directly. The third item on the list is endorsing a price on carbon. This was one of the items that garnered a lot of discussion, a lot of press. It's one that probably is not popular on either extreme sides of the political spectrum, but it's one that we feel is really going to be the most impactful way to address the carbon emissions and to address the risks associated with climate change. That a market price, a way to address climate will drive innovation, will send a market signal to consumers, will provide revenues in order to address other efforts around climate. And we think that this allows, by focusing on the market and a well-designed policy, can deliver all that, as opposed to more of a mandated or prescriptive-based approach that would regulate maybe one particular segment, but not necessarily all segments, or stifle innovation that's necessary to potentially take on, I think, the broader issue and the more complex issue associated with climate change. Cleaner fuels, we're in the fuels business, obviously, so focusing on cleaner fuels and cleaner fuel options for consumers is the fourth point that we are focusing on. This includes not only focusing on I guess cleaner natural gas, so ways in which to produce natural gas in a cleaner way, and making those available to consumers. So that's a very important initiative that we're undertaking, but also just looking at transportation fuels, but looking at it on a holistic basis. Right now, there's various ways in which we've been trying to address and reduce emissions from fuels, whether that be looking at the vehicles, whether that be looking at the fuels, whether that be looking at technology or the infrastructure. And we're really working hard with our members and other policymakers on ways to sort of bring those together into a more holistic policy that sort of takes that on and really can drive lower emissions from fuel use. The final piece that I just wanted to address is really around climate reporting. The other ones are very operational, very market driven, but we also recognize that the industry has a desire to explain itself and talk about what it's doing. And that includes sustainability reporting and getting our members more aligned on sustainability reporting and the impact of their operations, and discussing their operations through their sustainability reports. And we have had in the industry for quite some time, well over a couple decades now, guidance on how to report their operations and do sustainability reporting. And we're working on ways to not only enhance that, but also expand the use of those guidelines within our industry. The other piece is taking on reporting of emissions from our operations, and really filling a gap that's out there so that not only policymakers but also folks in the financial industry and investors and just the consuming public can understand better the emissions from our operations. Getting clarity on those and being able to compare those and sort of bring those together for all the various members that make up the API and operate within the industry. So these are the 5 points that we believe we're really can address the opportunities for driving to a cleaner future. And we're working with lawmakers on both the state and the federal level on many of these points and ways to sort of drive them into I think real fruition. And we look forward to engaging further on these as we go forward. So I know that as we sort of move to the next slide, that there's been a lot kind of thrown at you and brought up for discussion. And I think one of the things that Megan and I want to reiterate is that we are a resource. There are issues, there's questions. We're a complex industry. We're doing complex things. We are involved in many aspects of daily life, and there are questions that are out there. And we always want to serve as a resource for folks to ask questions and to seek answers on sort of what we're doing and how we're doing it. So I don't know if there's some email or some websites or reference material on the next slide, but certainly we can. Yeah, there it is. So we have some information that you can go to that provide just some general economic information. So we have our chief economist has pulled out information that is an industry outlook, but also we provide monthly statistics on the industry that is very helpful. And then of course api.org, and then you can certainly follow us as well on the various social media sites as well. But I'll sort of close there and thank you again for the opportunity. But Megan, I don't know if you had any other points that you'd wish to address.
I think you did a great job. Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you both. It really is important to me looking at a lot of that, what you shared. My takeaway from what I heard was that you recognize that the role of oil and gas industry in this energy transition is a really timely one, an important one, and that API is interested in showcasing its thoughts and its views and being a resource to folks who may have questions, and that you're really focused also on addressing climate change and reducing emissions while seeking to meet the growing demand for energy, and why you see that as very important to API. I think what's happening now and your 5 pillars that you laid out really sort of showcases a pathway. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what you see as the greatest regulatory and perhaps legislative challenges for folks in the oil and gas industry that will need to be addressed to address climate change.
Stephen, you go ahead and take that one.
Okay. So
Easy.
yeah, so I mean, the greatest challenge I think is just the partisanship that I think we're seeing out there, and sort of recognizing that a solution is going to be found somewhere kind of in the middle, that there will be a need for oil and natural gas in the future, but that the oil and gas industry needs to sort of come to the table with solutions, and that the status quo is not an appropriate path for the future. And so, coming out with the position on pricing of carbon, I think we recognized and we knew that we were going to run into some headwinds, not only amongst Democrats but also Republicans. But that I think that what we sort of are trying to address is the fact that there's ways operationally to implement this, but also that there's an opportunity to do this, and that can also, that we think can meet sort of the planks or objectives of both parties, and trying to find the opportunities for solution. I think that as we look on the federal side, there are concerns with taking a balkanized approach, looking at just transportation fuels, or just looking at electric generation, or just looking at another aspect, and not sort of taking this holistic approach where we're sort of thinking about the entire economy and ways in which we can drive climate change solutions through the entire economy. And then I think on the state level, obviously states have a very strong desire to take these on. And I think that one of the pieces that we're looking at is whether it's California, or whether it's TCI in the Northeast states, or whether it's other state initiatives, ways in which you can bring sort of those efforts around carbon pricing together, such that there's not the sort of this very confusing patchwork, but actually have them work together. So these are some of the things that I think that we're really trying to work with and work through, and try to bring together, I think, a broader picture, more economy-wide picture, and a way to drive solutions. But that's going to be difficult, I think, for politicians, certainly because you're focused on what your parochial interests are, which are important, which are your constituents, which are your local issues. But then, of course, climate is bigger and broader, and sometimes it's hard to understand how they all work together. And that's one of the points that I think we're trying to drive home on the issues, especially what's kind of our operations, but also on carbon pricing. So, Commissioner, I'm not sure if that addressed fully your question, but
I think that really was very helpful. I kind of looked at it, and again, I go back to your 5 pillars: the accelerating technology and the need, and you can really see some true programs that are being done by the oil and natural gas industry to rapidly deploy new technologies in a way that is looking to lower global greenhouse gas emissions, but also to help the economy. And so I like the connection you made to the accelerating technologies with reducing emissions, but also then layering that on of the need to recognize the carbon pricing policy, but that you stop to acknowledge that there may be tensions on either side around that issue. And that may be an opportunity for collaboration, because ultimately the issues really are about balancing that reliability, environmental sustainability, and the cost of energy supply to meet the need. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what you see as the next steps towards that collaboration.
Yeah, so I think that one is just getting people comfortable that a price on carbon can be moved through the economy, and that there are ways in which to sort of mitigate the impacts on GDP, but also let's understand that it could be very regressive as well, and we need to sort of make sure that that's understood, and ways to address that regressivity, either through moving that money back to populations, or investing it in ways to provide other sort of opportunities around energy. So I think that the next steps too is on the technology front is to fund programs that are already out there, that have already been identified. So the Energy Act of 2020 was passed at the end of last year. There's $6 billion worth of programs just focused on CCUS alone, and ways in which to sort of address the technology development that needs to take place there. There's focus on hydrogen in there, and there's focus on a number of fuel cell and other technologies that are in there, and appropriating the money for that. But it's not a one-stop shop too. I think that the understanding that Department of Energy and others need to have continuous funding to kind of keep thinking about these opportunities. And then I think that there needs to be a real focused way of identifying and separating out those that really make the grade from that can be made to the commercial stage, and figuring out ways to implement those through allowing for around permitting, or ways to you're going to have to move energy, whether it be electrons or whether it be oil and natural gas, and thinking about ways in which to do that to not only rural communities but at-risk communities, and do so in an appropriate way. And so, those are some of the pieces that we're sort of thinking about. We have our own operations and fuels and things like that we're focused on, but also as you take the carbon pricing policy and you take the technology development, how do those work together, and how can you move them out into the next phase? And those are some of the sweet spots that we're trying to focus on.
Great, thank you. I don't see any further questions. I'm wondering, while people maybe you want to remind people if they want to, feel free to type questions in the chat so we can get to you. In the meantime, are there any key takeaways from a communication standpoint that's helpful, Megan, in terms of the outreach that's done and where people can, sort of think about focusing on?
I think one of the things is more of a proof point, Commissioner, and that is you look back on the history. And so back in, I think often, because I was, starting out in Washington not long before, but about the Waxman-Markey bill, which was the last time Congress put forth sort of climate legislation. And that 2010 bill, if enacted, Congress projected that CO2 in 2019 would decline by as much as 10% below 2017 levels. But in fact, because of industry innovations that allowed our industry to get more natural gas and to bring that into the market, CO2 declined at a greater rate, 50% more. So like 15% below 2007 levels. So there's a mix in what Stephen was noting, and your focus on innovation, which I think is so good, because there's so much there's so much harm that we can do. And back at that time, we were a net importer of energy in a very significant way. Our CO2 emissions, were high and growing. We were still talking about running out of oil. Renewables were a growing market share, but albeit small as sort of the broader pie grows. There was little talk of keep it in the ground. There wasn't any talk of getting rid of internal combustion engines, which are how 9 1/4 out of 10 people across the country move. So there's a lot that's changed, and innovation in that time has helped. So sometimes I feel like the storytelling is one of the key things that we work to do in communications, to really highlight the engineering mindset and the innovation that's underway, and to really talk authentically about our intent and some of things that may not have gone well.
That's very helpful. One of the questions that was asked was about how can elected women, and really I would add policymakers and the public, access information moving forward. I know that we're going to have the slides sent to everyone on this list, and at the end, it did give your contact information as well as the website for API. I will say API does a really good job of updating their reports, especially the March 2020 sustainability report, and how that ties into what you're doing, I think is very helpful, because you're trying to draw a connection to the actions that you're taking. How is it then being looked at from a data point, and how then does it fit from an accountability into sustainability? And that report, I think, is helpful for folks. So you will have that opportunity. I also think that it's important to continually engage with a broader group. And I wonder if API finds it useful in terms of, PHMSA with their advisory committees, which has a broad group. And I don't think many people understand just how broad that stakeholder group is for those advisory committees that API has been very involved in. I don't know if you want to speak to that for a minute.
I can talk about getting engaged, but Stephen, do you want to talk on some of the government advisory groups?
Well, I just know that, frankly, stakeholder involvement is extremely key. And whether it's through PHMSA or even sort of the more local engagements, that we are recognize that we have to engage with stakeholders, and that it's important for our story to be out there and told. I mean, that's some of the Energy for Progress discussions and some of the platforms that Megan's been running as a way to sort of broaden that. But frankly, it's just us being more engaged on some of those some of those levels to talk to our stories. We recognize that there are a number of stories that are out there in the press that sort of, I guess, address or center around the engagement of our industry with populations. But I think that getting direct input and getting sort of feedback, especially from policymakers on things that matter to them, will help us shape policy, will help us sort of think about ways in which to better engage. And I don't have any direct experience with the PHMSA programs, but I have them through other programs. And I found them to be extremely important for us to sort of hear and at least understand.
Yeah, and what we can do, Commissioner, is as we send around the slides, we have kind of two things. First, we'd love to hear from you directly through LinkedIn or however we can share information, but about how this is landing with you. What other kind of data would be useful for you to see? We can get you links or, just any candid feedback about the challenges that the industry face, because a lot of this is local and it's really specific, and we want to make sure we're not kind of drinking our own Kool-Aid, but we're speaking in a way that is useful. The second thing is we do a program called Energy Citizens where people sign up to get more information. We can certainly send you a link. This is calls to action for the most part, but it's something that Caitlin on our team is really engaged in and a great way for you to get regular updates. We also have been doing e-communications from our CEO, Mike Summers, into you all on a weekly basis, or sometimes it's a bi-weekly basis on key issues. So if you're not getting those, I'd love to hear that. And then finally, we do a broader campaign called Energy for Progress, which talks about and there's a website, energyforprogress.org, and it shows sort of all the different ways that we're working on this issue. We're working together with labor and with minority communities and with innovators in the high tech industry. And at the same time, work that we're doing ourselves to really reduce our environmental footprint. Like, we used to have to drill quite a bit of land space in order to get any kind of energy from oil and natural gas. And now the innovation has enabled us to have a 90% smaller surface footprint. And so all of these things, we're just continuing to try and raise the bar. And then once we do that in the US with our standards, that can be adopted across the world. So we're really, and working with different renewable innovation from liquid fuels, et cetera. So all of that is featured on that Energy for Progress site.
Great. So before we close, do either of you have anything else that you want to share before we wrap up?
I would just say, oh, sorry. Let me go real quick, Stephen. I would just say that the work that you all are doing and the platform that you have is so very important to be able to you're meeting your constituents where they are and you're representing them, but you also have the ability to share with them and activate them to get involved in some of these discussions. People have so much going on right now in the pandemic, et cetera, but these are issues that are pocketbook issues, they're value set issues, and they're kind of future of America issues from a national security standpoint. So I just want to thank you for your service to the country and also encourage you to keep it up.
Okay. Stephen?
Yeah, so I guess there was a question, sort of 3 or 4 takeaways that would be helpful. I saw that, but I would sort of say that we are a resource, and that again, that to the extent that there are questions, and that it's a complex area and one that we feel that we can provide at least some insights to. So I think takeaway number 1 is reach out to us if you have questions or you need further information. 2 is that we're taking this seriously. This is the climate framework is one that matters to us, and one that we feel we wish to progress and see progressed, over time. And so we're devoting real energy to it. And 3 is that we're just not going to rest on our laurels. That the solutions of tomorrow are in the minds of our folks today. And we need to bring those to fruition, and it's something that really matters to us. And so, the sort of stodgy idea of the oil and gas industry is one that is in the past, and I think that the new innovations that are coming forward are ones that will shock and amaze, and hopefully drive us to greater solutions in the future. So I just want to recognize those. But I really do thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to you today.
Great, thank you so much. We did get one last question as you were speaking, which I think is a really important one, especially being a woman in energy, which is there any additional information on how we can promote the gas and petroleum business as a career choice for women?
I think that is a great question. Thank you, Sharon Scott. I was going to ask you, Commissioner, if I could double dip to address it. We do some work with Discovery Education, a STEM careers coalition. We're very engaged in a number of schools across the country to try and get young women into science, technology, engineering, and math. At the same time, this is a bit of a challenge. It's a bit of a regional issue. And so that has been a very effective effort, but there's more education that's needed. We've done some look at an aging workforce, and the women and minority are going to make up almost more than half of the new jobs that we hire over the course of the next decade and a half. So this is an issue that our companies are working on. Many of them are focused in on supplier kind of diversity and getting different suppliers in, as well as trying to demonstrate the industry as an important place for the future. Interestingly, some of our companies in Houston and elsewhere are getting a lot of students. Once they come out of engineering school, they're wanting to work in our industry. But getting them into those engineering schools is something that we've been working hard to do in partnership with our member companies and with education organizations like Discovery Education. But welcome any other thoughts that you all have. And Stephen, any thoughts you have?
Oh, great. I think that's really helpful. I will tell you, I do think it's a personal and professional responsibility for all of us to lean in, trying to bring more gender and other diversity into the energy sector, and especially the oil and gas sector. For me, it's something that I really try to be mindful of no matter where I am, and trying to reach out to people. I actually found one of my greatest interns while I was watching my son's college rugby team, as I heard her next to me talking about how she was a geology major and didn't know where she wanted to work during the summer. And I talked to her. She never would have thought about applying to become a summer intern at our commission. And it's really, really important for us to take time for that. I am going to now close. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I want to especially thank the National Foundation of Women Legislators, as well as API, for being willing to do this joint webinar. I'm really pleased to be able to connect with leaders and engage on important information. And I'm glad that we've all had the opportunity to connect with our speakers today. Please feel free to reach out to the National Foundation of Women Legislators for any questions or comments following this event. They will be posting all the materials referenced to the website, and we'll follow up with an email with links to all the resources mentioned on this call. One of those slides will have the contact information for both Stephen and Megan. I hope you're all staying safe, taking the time for yourselves, and I look forward to connecting digitally and in person again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you,
Thank you.
very much. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Take care. Thank you.
Hi, Adrian.
Thank you. And Jody, I wish I were on the island. No, I made it. I'm practicing for when I get vacation.
Well, you're close, though. You're on Virginia Beach, aren't you?
Yeah, I can go there, but that's not that exciting.
Not the same. Thank you all.
No, but thank you. This was very helpful. I enjoyed the presentation.
Great.
Thank you.
Aloha, everyone. Take care.
Hi, Senator Ken.
Aloha. Hope to see you guys.
Aloha. I hope to
Your
see you
background.
soon.
Really
Stay
does.
safe.
Stay safe.
All righty.